Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
Back in my day, to become an author, you had to master your craft. You needed a team that you could trust, a team that would never flinch in battle. Back in my day, you would risk losing your rights and pay outrageous amounts for terrible service. Well, yesterday is not today. Gladiator Publishing Company has a century-long reputation for defending writers and readers and winning awards for their record-setting low-cost services and market sales. They are 75 to 80% more cost-effective and never touch your royalties or copyrights. Go with a publisher that is so transparent that they have their contract on their webpage. Have your book treated with honesty, loyalty, and respect, period. Visit us at gladiatorpublishing.com or text us at 417-291-9162.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is Daniel Horowitz, who is a writer based out of New York, although he spends most of his time traveling, and has written for publications such as USA Today, Digital Trends, Elite Daily, Complex. It just goes on and on. His debut graphic novel right now is called Lord of the Twin Lands, and he's launching it very soon. And what is really exciting about this is that the former Marvel DC artist Rich Perrotta is doing all the artwork for it, and you can imagine how wonderful that's going to be. With that said, I want to welcome to my show Daniel Horowitz.
Hi, how you doing? Daniel here.
Well, you know, Daniel, writing a book is often a very lonely thing, and coming up with an idea is also very challenging. With that said, how did you start, and what inspired you to write this particular book?
So it's actually pretty interesting. I first read this book by Freud, actually, called Moses and Monotheism, and it's basically a thought experiment that goes on about what if Moses was an Egyptian, and it uses this process called psychohistorical analysis to imagine what the motivations would have been given that that were the case. So I kind of used that as a base to write this book. At the time that I wrote the first draft of this book, I was also a student at Oxford in England, and I had a writing teacher I was working with one-on-one, and he kind of helped me develop the genesis of the idea. So we would meet once a week. You know, I would turn in maybe 15, 20 pages. We would go over it, and it's gone through many drafts since then, but that was the initial genesis of it.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting when I heard you say about Moses and people of that nature, and, you know, it reminds me that it's very historical. You must have studied history and had a love for it, because in the book it reflects the idea that so many different things happen as I said before, to history.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've studied history for many years. It was definitely I was a liberal arts major in college, but definitely history was one of my main focuses. I was particularly focusing on ancient history. I loved like Roman and Egyptian history, and really I took a trip to Egypt actually, and that definitely inspired some other parts of the work, especially meeting with one of the guys who was an architect who kind of helped develop like a lot of the major models for the temples, like the Temple Karnak, which is like the biggest temple in the world, and that really helped inspire the parts of the book for me.
Mm-hmm. You know, you chose, when you wrote this book, you chose to retell, in a sense, the story of Exodus. Now, people, I'm sure my listeners would love to know a little bit about how that influenced your writing, and whether it's going to be an exciting challenge to kind of get through the book.
So, you know, luckily with the help of Rich Perrotta, who's the artist, we definitely were able to make it pretty action-oriented and accessible, but at the same time it does have these heavy themes and does require like a basic knowledge of the story. But I think as long as you know the basic plot beats of Exodus, I think you won't really have a problem reading the book, as while it does reinvent the story, it very much tells its own story as well.
Okay, so I don't expect you to tell us the entire story because I know that we want people to buy the book and to have fun reading it. But give us a story. Give us a little chapter or a synopsis of the book, if you will.
Sure. So the book, the premise of the book is that Moses is not a Hebrew but an Egyptian, and he is a general in the court of Akhenaten. And for those who don't know, Akhenaten he's the father of King Tut, who's obviously famous for having his tomb found pretty untouched. But Akhenaten was the original pusher of a monotheistic type religion. While that doesn't totally align with like a Judeo-Christian faith, I thought it would be interesting to kind of combine the two. So what happens is Moses sort of gets involved in Akhenaten's political/religious revolution, becomes a general in his army, kind of goes, conquers, and then sort of realizes like what's happened and what's become, and then ends up going into exile.
So there's kind of a connection to the whole Moses situation where he walks across the water and he opens it up, and he's the kind of leader who develops the Ten Commandments, and that sounds like it's sort of connected in some ways. Is that true or not?
Oh, very much so. So all the basic events in Exodus do happen, but they happen in different ways. They do cross the water, but instead of with the Hebrews toward the end of the story, he forges the water with an army, of the conquering army. So it definitely adds a different sort of flavor and meaning, and kind of builds on your basic knowledge of the story.
You know, you mentioned that you went to Oxford. Now, while that's not the most important thing with regard to this interview, but I would like to understand a little bit about what was it like to be at Oxford University, which is known, it's sort of the Harvard of England. Was it an interesting experience that you had there, and did it enrich your ideas about writing this book as well? Oh,
absolutely. I loved it. And I think that without the pushing of the professor I worked with there, I don't think I would have been able to develop this into a full, I think it would have just stayed an idea. So really just being in that environment and feeling like you had that push toward this just like total, like intellectually available environment, I think really helped me to flesh out the book and create this into like a more comprehensive work.
Intellectual environment. When I say those words and when you said the words, what pops up in your mind?
Definitely like the Bodleian Library, which is like probably the biggest college library in the world. There's just so many rich texts that you can go through to get different ideas for what you're writing. So for me, just having access to that and having access to the campus environment as well really, I think, helped me develop and flesh this out.
Yeah. And with regard to the people who are going to read the book, what age do you think it's going to really impress?
I think it could definitely be like 14 and up. There are some mature themes and a good amount of action and things like that. It's not a kid's book for sure, but I think that it's definitely anyone who just has a basic idea of the story and likes comics and action-oriented stuff, I think could really enjoy it.
Is there a connection in any way to Harry Potter?
Not especially. I would say that demographically it does like deconstruct some of the same themes about like really kind of like growing up and coming into your own.
Now, okay, this is kind of an interesting thing for me to learn, and that is set the stage for me. So one day you decide on a particular subject, and then next you decide that you want to write it and put it all together. What are the steps that you went through in order to get the book published?
Well, I mean, the first step, beyond writing it, of course, was finding the correct artistic partner. And I was very fortunate to meet Rich just through a prior connection, and we ended up really hitting it off and deciding to work on this book together. And the truth is, we met a few years ago, but really didn't find the time to really work on this book and get it done until about a year ago. So really just the two of us working together, I think, totally changed the book in the most positive way. Bringing his sensibilities and experience into it, I think really did the book a lot of good and kind of created it into a, not just something that might be more worthy of a 500-page novel, but something that is more a 160-page graphic novel. So just changing the pacing, changing some of the characterization, and just making it an overall faster-paced book, I think really helped it a lot. So for me, that was the most rewarding part of the creative process. Of course, publishing it is the next section, and that's currently where we're at. We should be launching soon, so that's very exciting.
And who are you publishing it with?
Right now we're looking for a publisher. It's a lot of graphic novels go to Kickstarter, so I think we will be going there first, and then once that's done, then we'll be looking for a publisher.
Mm-hmm. What's your day job?
I come from a journalism background. Right now I actually pivoted a little bit, and I am an SEO manager. So I run PR for an SEO company.
Do you find that as interesting as actually being an author?
I think you get to see a different side of things. Obviously my first love is writing, but I think for me it's a really good job that fits into my lifestyle and sensibilities, and I really like the people I work with. And while sometimes the actual work can get a little technical from where I'm usually where my general background is, it is something I do enjoy, yes.
I hear you. Often books are made into either movies or to TV series, and, with all that Marvel comic, this sounds like it could be part of a little TV thing, maybe on a station that loves to kind of get teenagers and younger people to kind of watch. Any goals to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that would be very ideal. I actually had a connection with the producer of Super Size Me, and she had taken a look at it, and she thought that it was definitely ready for that kind of thing, but it does need to be published first, so that is the first step. But after that, yeah, I think that would be absolutely great.
I also want to know, it sounds like it's a very serious subject and kind of an exciting one in many ways because of the cartoons that are being produced. But is there any humor in it? And are you kind of person who likes to put humor in something, or you have a funny side of you?
Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely a pretty funny guy. You could ask anyone I know. There is a good amount of humor in it. I think it's just a lot of like deconstructing some of the themes. Like there's a part, for example, where they bring the like matzah outside of when they go into exile, and of course, like it doesn't work baking the bread in the sun like that, and that's like a humorous moment. And there are just like small moments throughout the book like that I think have a humorous side to them, and I think really make the book stronger, because otherwise I think it would be too serious and a little less accessible. So
yeah. And what about gender specific? Is there any particular gender that likes it more than the other, or will like it more than the other?
I think it is more of like a slight deconstruction of like the general hero's journey, so maybe it might appeal a little more to males, but I think that there's plenty for women to like as well.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious. So when you worked with the person in England to do this, again, here you were trying to really establish yourself as a writer. And did you ever talk to people at Oxford and say, I want you to read some of the books so that you can tell me whether it's going to be successful or not? Was it something that really you were passionate about? Oh,
absolutely. It really was the primary reason I was there, and definitely like consumed my entire year there, which was really good. At the end, I did show it to several writing professors there who all loved it and thought it had a lot of potential, and definitely encouraged me to publish it.
Wow. And, I'm also thinking about some of the people that I know who are writers, and I'm going to tell you a tiny story. We actually interviewed a young guy who had a table, if you could believe that, in front of the New York Public Library. And
oh, wow.
Could you imagine that? I mean, here he is.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it was so amazing. I got to tell you something, Daniel. It was amazing because this guy, not only did he sell his books, he also he wrote poetry, a lot of poetry, and he also, what he did was he challenged everybody to take that book and make it into a play. And he got it done. Just sitting in front of the New York Public Library, he was able to push his book, to sell it, and then to get it in the theater. So, I had a lot of respect for him, I got to tell you, because, man, can you imagine doing something like that, sitting in the snow, sitting in the rain, sitting in the sun? Would you do something like that? I'm just curious. Would you?
It's definitely possible. I mean, the first step is I actually have been to many comic book conventions, actually as far as Maine, because I'm also involved with a creative studio where I've done a couple of superhero titles. They're kind of in the pre-release stage still, but we've gone and sold a lot of posters and traveled quite a distance to do so. So I think there's a lot I would do for this book because it is such a personal story to me. I don't know if I would sit out day and night, but I think that there is a lot I would do, yes.
Yeah. And now we know that you're a writer. We know what you do for a living. We know a lot about you because of what you told us. But who's the real Daniel? Will the real Daniel stand up?
I mean, really, I would say a lot of my life right now is devoted to traveling and just exploring the world. I'm lucky enough with my job that it's a remote position that I can do from anywhere. So just in the last couple of years alone, I've gone to 6 continents and 40 different countries and just exploring and traveling the world. So for me, that's been one of the greatest eye-opening experiences. And yeah, I just love to have a good time. I have a lot of friends as well. And just hanging out. So I definitely am someone who likes to entertain and tell jokes and things like that. So I think really just a very curious person.
Yeah.
I think that was a real genesis of this.
I hear you, and that sounds great, and I know that based upon what you're talking about, it's going to be very successful for you because you got the passion, and you need the passion because the competition is wild. Now, that is, kind of makes me want to ask the next question. I know you are doing everything to try to get it published and to get it sold, but are you on to something else, another type of story?
Yeah, I have another book I've mostly written. I kind of want to see how this one can do first. That one is totally different. It's about alien conspiracy theories out in New Mexico. And I actually interviewed this very prominent guy who's involved, who's actually on Anthony Bourdain's show talking about it. So he was an interesting guy to talk to. And that one I've written most of, but I need to go back and do some stuff. I also have a couple of superhero titles I wrote for Cornerstone Creative Studios, which we're currently in the process of publishing. So hopefully those will come out in the near future. So I do have other things in the works as well.
Yeah. Are your books going to be on books and tapes?
I think because they're graphic novels, they'll primarily be in print and then also digital.
I see. Okay, so if people want to read your book and if they want to get a hold of it, how do they do that?
So, we're going to set up a Kickstarter page. Will be the first step, and that should be coming in the coming months. I don't have a specific link for that. I do have a website, though, Horowitz Writes, HOROWITZ Writes.com, where I do give updates about the book as well.
That's terrific. Now, I always like to give my guests the last word. Is there something that you'd like to tell the audience?
Yeah, I think that This book will be a really exciting project. I think it has a lot to say, not just about the ancient world, but about the world we live in now and how we think about heroes and their journeys. So I think if that's something you're interested in and are interested in just like politics, religion, or anything like that, then this might be the book for you.
Well, today my guest has been Daniel Horowitz, who's a writer, and the book that he's written is called Lord of the Twin Lands, and he's launching it soon, and I want you to really take a look for it because it's going to be a very interesting story, and it just so that I repeat again that it's retelling the story of the Exodus narrative cast during the reign of Akhenaten. Wow.
Yeah.
And the birth of monotheism. Oh, you know what? We must, before we finish the show, I want you to define what monotheism is.
So it is the primary role of a singular god among others. It doesn't necessarily mean that god is the sole god, but that they are a chief god among gods, unequivocally so.
Yeah. And also, you said the Egyptian general in the court of Akhenaten grapples with his growing power amidst political unrest. Now, the reason that I wanted to tell our audience that specific sentence is because we are dealing today with a lot of political unrest. Is there a connection at all?
Absolutely. I think that it really is the idea of an authoritarian strongman using certain ideas and justifying certain things through systems that promote the national interest, at least to others, so that there is absolutely a connection.
Again, I want to say thank you, Daniel Horowitz, for being on the Susan Brender Show. It's really been an enlightenment
thanks so much,
for
Susan.
me and our audience. You're welcome, and take care now.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.